Hi, I'm Kasha and I'm going to run you through a quick few tips on writing poetry. Firstly, there's a misconception that poetry is hard because it has a lot of rules. In reality, poetry comes in many shapes and sizes, and no one poem is like any other. For example, in prose you have to maintain good grammar and punctuation, but in poetry you can make these things work for you. Essentially, don't be afraid of poetry. It's prose for rebels. Someone once described poetry to me as the anarchist of literature. While there are some forms of poetry that ask you to rhyme here or use a certain amount of lines there, you can sometimes break these rules on purpose to create a specific effect. As long as you have a good reason to, you can do this as well. But if you prefer, there is always free verse, a form of poetry with no rules at all. You can find a pretty impressive list of poetry forms online with a quick Google search. The basic thing you need to know is structure, rhythm and rhyme, things like that, they're all just tools in your belt of techniques. Think about your message. Does a particular form of poetry help you convey it? For example, a villanelle with its repetitive lines would be a good form of poetry for a poem about forgetfulness. However, a haiku about the biggest, hugest, shiniest apple ever showing up in Leeds doesn't have enough space in it to impress the magnitude of what you're trying to say. Write something true. At its core, poetry is a form of communication. In writing a poem, you should wish to communicate something to your reader. Your reader wants to relate to your poem. They want to understand it on a personal level. Like in prose, poetry uses descriptive language to evoke reactions from your reader. It may seem counterintuitive, but very specific imagery will be more relatable than vague ones. Think about your favourite memory. Which of your senses do you most remember? When writing a poem, we often talk about sight and our emotional reactions to it. That's because sight can be the easiest sense to communicate, but experiences are rarely based on just one sense. So think about how to incorporate more of these senses into your work if possible. There's lots of things about language that we do instinctively to elicit a certain response. That is essentially what poetic techniques like these are. For example, you might write about a white dove if you want your reader to think about peace. Or you might use a lot of similar sounds if you want to give your poem a sense of musicality. Or you might use a line break to force your reader to pause if that's necessary. Use whichever techniques will help you convey your poem's meaning to your reader. But remember, you don't need technique or rhyme or structure to write a good poem. They are just there to help you say what you're trying to say in as precise a way as possible. But throwing in as many techniques as possible isn't going to create the best poem. What I'm trying to say is, think about which specific techniques will help you now, and the rest you can play with another day. Finally, good luck in the competition. And if you'd like to learn more, follow us on social media for more information about our free upcoming creative writing class.